Okay, I'm bringing this up because someone said, "What's the point of having low blow in their hotbar when it's a roll action?" And I feel like, let me tell you something. Okay, there's something that okay, if I could title like the number one feature that Final Fantasy XIV needs something, it's more roll actions. But here's kind of like the difference because right now the way how the game is designed is that if you're playing like Paladin, Dragoon, you know, Astro, you know, Pictomancer, Dancer, like it doesn't matter, right? Like you have this whole like sectional thing of actions, and you literally need every single action to be able to do content, whether it's like dungeons or raids or which is cool. I mean, I like that. And then you have those role actions, which like amazingly enough, they're required in some formats, but then there's some abilities that just are kind of like, why is it there, right? So here's kind of what I want to talk about because this is to me, I would love for them to figure out a way to make this like a very expansive and extensive thing because, well, there's a couple things I want to cover. First and foremost, Dawn Trail is designed to be the expansion where they try to make the content a little bit more stressful and like engaging because big hitboxes and Endwalker, people were not like the biggest fan of that, which like totally understandable. And like they're making it more logical in the various pieces of content in like the raids and the trials and dungeons, which is cool. And I think like the variant dungeon kind of taught us like, wow, like you can have like tertiary events or abilities and actions that you can use that like, you know, allow you to go through the experience like a little bit better, but also as a result like add a little bit of difficulty. Because the variant dungeon, like low key, not necessarily super difficult in like the mob form, but the bosses actually kind of pose like a little bit of a challenge. Anyways, so in the dungeon content that we have currently for Dawn Trail, like the dungeons are actually not necessarily easy. But the thing is like there are still people that I've learned over the course of doing the expansion since the release. People struggle with the dungeon, which is fine. But at the same time though, like, we have a very wide range of players that are really like, oh, like this content is dungeon, like it's super easy, whatever. And then you have people that are like, I literally can't go in a dungeon without getting like dragged across the floor, which doesn't feel good, right? Because like you're like the warrior of light and meant to be like level 100 and godlike, etc. So then I kind of thought about like, the way how the variant abilities are in like that content, it'd be really cool to find a way to make it in like the MSQ content, but like not where there's like an enrage, you know? So again, if I can title like the number one feature that needs to be added in Final Fantasy XIV content for like dungeons and trials and anything that doesn't have an enrage per se, is role actions. So let me just kind of like go through this with you real quick. So for tanks, right? These are the only abilities that you have as a tank with role actions in mind. And the funny thing is that Rampart, Provoke, Interject, weirdly enough, Reprisal, Arm's Length, and Shirk are all like required to be put on the hotbar somewhere. And that's universal for all the tanks, which is cool. And even more so too, like tanks have acquired trait abilities in their leveling up process that affect some of those traits. Like Reprisal gets an extended 5 seconds from 10 to 15 at like 94 or something, or 96, and then Rampart gets like an additional effect at level 98, I think it is, for all tanks, right? Healer, you have Repose, which like you don't use because like what's the point? Asuna, which is kind of required, Swiftcast, which is like a necessity, Lucid Dreaming, which is required, Surecast, and Rescue is like, it's like there, right? So anyways, to kind of bring it back up to the tanks, like the only ability that you absolutely don't need is low blow because it doesn't work in a raid scenario, and using it in a dungeon is kind of like what's the point? It exists. So here's kind of what my preposition is, because I would love for them to look into this. I would like for them to just create like variations of every single role ability and even add like a lot more where in content specific where it's not meant to be like a challenge, right? So like not that dungeons aren't challenging, but like like a dungeon doesn't have like an enrage, it's meant to be enjoyable for the MSQ and things like that, right? So let me paint you a scenario because I feel like this might be more relevant. When I was playing Machinist, shout out Machinist, we were doing in Endwalker the Dead Ends dungeon, which is at like that last or that first level 90 Endwalker dungeon. Here's the thing, that dungeon is actually like the bosses are actually kind of like a lot for some players who, you're just like, yeah, I can just press 1, 2, 3 the whole time and then not pay attention to anything and then whatever. But like, I was playing Machinist, and so therefore, like, I only can do damage. I can't do any kind of resurrection, and my utility is to like reduce damage but not recover. So I was paired with like a white mage, which they were new, which is not a big deal. It's fine. And then we also had a summoner, and we also had like a tank. I think it was a paladin. So here's what's happening, right? Because the white mage, usually the white mage, if they are dead, then the summoner can do the res, right? But then what ends up happening is like the white mage is just dying and eating everything, so they're just dying. And then because the summoner isn't like the most like incredible cracked summoner of all time, because like it's a dungeon, they get hit with that one AoE puddle, and then they get that debuff, and it needs to be a Sunad, but the healer is dead, so then they die. So then the tank is kind of like, well, now it's just me and this Machinist, right? So then we're both gonna eventually just like succumb to death because it's whatever. Because then you have like that one debuff we go like pair together and it like spreads, and the AoEs eventually and tank busters, right? So like eventually we just die and keep on wiping. So what ends up happening is like the white mage feels really bad, and it's just like, I'm sorry that I suck at this game, and then I just quit. Which I'm like, well, that's not, we didn't really say anything like to you. It's just more like like they felt that way, right? So here's kind of what my thought process was, is like, if I can self-sustain myself in content that is not necessarily like designed for the challenge, right? Because like Savage Raids and Ultimates and Extreme Trials and now in Chaotic Raids are all designed for like the challenge. So because there is like a timer to like being able to beat the fight from start to finish, then those abilities just like should not be applied, right? Because like it's just designed in that kind of format. But like I would like for them to provide some kind of utility that people can use to like self-sustain themselves and go into content with dungeon, etc. wise, right? Now with trials and raids, they should kind of keep it strict, where it's still like the 2 tanks, 2 healer, 4 DPS kind of vibe, like sure. But I think that like if they remove the role restriction in dungeons, for example, but then let people kind of bring their own sustainable kits to the dungeons, which again like only applies for dungeons. Like how nice would it be to not be able to queue into a DPS and like level up, do like leveling DPS, and then you can be paired with like 4 DPS. But like if you see that though, you can at least pick role actions that are optional in dungeon content, and all of a sudden now you have like a cure you can give yourself because of the fact that like you're like just not gonna need to worry about being healed by like a healer. And like obviously it lets kind of it also out for like a challenge, right? Because like some of those bosses will have tank busters, but if you have like a role action to give yourself like a shield or some kind of mitigation, and some jobs even have like that DPS kit where they can actually protect themselves, although it's like minor, but it's there, then all of a sudden you kind of fix some of the things that people kind of find to be challenging. Because like I have a friend who plays Reaper, and Reaper's only defensive measure is like the arcane bubble, and once that pops, like that's it, right? So me being a tank player and having my friend play healer, trying to help our friend go through the things as Reaper, like they're very like new to the game in a sense, and like they don't really take the game content like super seriously, but they love the story, right? So like why force them to deal with the kit that they have as a Reaper, where they only have like arcane crest and second wind and bloodbath, just to sit there and just press 1, 2, 3 the whole time, right? Like they don't, so it's like, I feel like what would be super nice is if you just had various actions to just pick from, and there should just be like a little bit of an asterisk that says like these only work in like specific pieces of content, and it would literally only be like dungeons and I would almost say like trials if the trial is related to MSQ. So like it would work in like Dancing Plague because it's Titania. It would work in Ifrit hard Bowel of Embers because like MSQ, right? But it would not work in say like Cinder Drift because Ruby Weapon, granted it's like a trial, it's not tied to MSQ, like it's an optional trial. So if the content is optional, then you should not have the access to these like this theoretical 50,000 abilities that you can use. But if it's MSQ related, then there should be an option there. Because like if you don't need it, like if I'm like an ultimate raider tank player and like I know how to play tank, then I don't need it, right? Because the buttons shouldn't offer like an offensive advantage. It should just offer like a recovery or defensive one. But like, I don't want it to kind of go overboard, because then, you know, if there's like a reprisal that reduces damage by like 20% and also adds like a dot, then that would be great to put in a dungeon for somebody who's damaged on the lower end, such as like a healer who, like, you know, is like nervous about keeping people alive, so they focus on healing, but they can press that, like, you know, poison reprisal or something, and still do damage and still help out with like keeping sustainability in check. But that button should not be used for like Savage Raids or Ultimates or Extreme Trials, right? Because like it does damage, which like not really like the most ideal thing ever. So, or if you want to add like a, I don't know, like a rampart of the ward where it's like a 20% reduction, but then it also adds like a 600 potency shield, and you can only put that on like DPS or healers, right? You know, that would be kind of the thing that I'm looking for, because I would love for them to figure out how to make that work. Because even me too, like, it's like if I'm really good at the video game, but I'm playing a job that relies on other people to keep me alive, but I know how to keep me alive, then I'm kind of like SOL, right? Because it's like, well, now I got to have them keep me alive. But sometimes you kind of like expect too much from some people, but at least that way you can kind of like realistically have like that expectation set to like a, okay, like it's just a dungeon, right? So I feel like with that in mind, I think a lot of players might just actually have a lot of an easier time, and like even for a lot of jobs too, because like I said, like in the variant dungeon, they actually kind of have it almost like to the T. Like if you can like tank and healer are two roles that don't do a lot of damage in comparison to DPS, but they have something called the Spirit Dart, and it does like a 60-second dot that does like insane potency. So and it's an OGCD, so they can throw it out while they're doing stuff, and like it kind of lets them do stuff. But obviously, once you go into Criterion, then that's just like not in the picture, right? Which is cool. I like that actually. So I would like for them to figure out a way to actually apply that in MSQ content, and also like that way you can kind of remove the role restriction, because waiting 20-something minutes to play like a, you know, a queue in for like a DPS, which is the most popular role because of the number of jobs that there are in comparison to like tank and healer, like it's a lot, right? So I mean, there's that. And like again, like moving on to melee, like see, because like legs, like no, I don't know anybody that has leg sweep, but like Second Wind is on everyone's hotbar. Bloodbath is required, Feint's required. It's literally required for content, which is I actually kind of like that. Arm's length is a necessity in some case scenarios, but it's like required in DSR, like literally. And then there's True North. So the thing is, like, I like that there's role abilities that there should be like a recommended roles section where it's like, we have these abilities in part of the kit for doing hardcore or like midcore content that has like an enrage. So like if you're going to try and tackle an ultimate or a savage tier, there should be like a sectional of abilities that are like, you need to bring these because they're literally like a necessity, and it should just be these abilities. Then you should just have some kind of separate queue of role abilities where it's like, I want to call them like questing role abilities or quest roles, something like that. That way it's just like, and it's just like a abundance of abilities, you know. It's like you've got like, and some of them are like really insane too. Like a lot of them can actually be like, you know, very, very overpowered. But again, like the objective is just to do it in MSQ, right? Not to do it with like, you know, like a Savage Raid. So give me like a turn Bloodbath into like a miniature raw intuition where you can just, every AoE you hit, it literally replenishes HP, which, hey, that'd be kind of cool actually, you know what I mean? But of course, like if a warrior is in the party, he obviously won't have access to raw intuition because like he already has raw intuition, right? But like he has his own like way to just do damage because again, warrior less DPS than like a melee, right? So that's my thought process at least. And then like coming here to like fizz range, like I've actually tried to literally use leg graze and foot graze, and I've not been able to figure out targets that actually like benefit from that in boss fights, right? These two abilities like rather useless, honestly, which like in some fights, right? In some fights. But then like Second Wind's required. Peloton is only used in dungeons when you're not in battle, or when you're like in the wild and you don't want to press sprint or your sprint's on cooldown. Like that's what Peloton's for. So like now you have 3 abilities that you can't use in battle, but like head graze is used once in a while, right? Maybe, and then the arm's length. So like now Fizz range only has 2 abilities, and this is kind of my point, because when I was playing Machinist in Dead Ends, you know, besides having like Tactician and Dismantle, all I had was Second Wind to keep myself afloat, and I play the dungeon like perfectly fine. I don't have any issues struggling in the dungeon, but now it's like, you know, if you ever had like a tank who doesn't have their stance on, and then you start like AoEing everything, and then you're taking all the brunt of the autos, you know what I mean? And then like you have to sit there and type stance, and then when you get killed, it just feels bad, right? So you like, you don't want to like get angry or frustrated at the person, but you're like, there is like a simple rule and etiquette that people follow that they should just follow. And as a machinist or like a bard, or in some cases like dancer too, but like I don't have any way to like deal with that, right? So like I feel like them giving me some kind of back-ended resource where it's like, you can't bring these in ultimates, but you can totally bring these in dungeons in case, like, you know, I would be absolutely happy about that. And then for magic range, we get the same thing, right? Like you need to use Addle, it's a requirement. Who, like, raise your hand if you have sleep on your hotbar. I mean, I do, but like, will I ever use it? Like, no. The only time I actually use it is when I'm playing like Red Mage and my tank is dead. And then I literally, like, away from the keyboard or controller, I stop attacking everything. And thankfully, if I'm playing like Red Mage, my damage is going to be like, my enmity won't be like a super high. So then like, what literally happens is the tank is dead. Then the healer is still AoEing, so then they get the brunt of the autos. And then my melee or my other DPSer is like about to start dying. Or if it's my turn, you know, I'll literally cast like for cure and then sleep, because that sleep is AoE. So I'll literally put them on a sleep, and then I'm like, don't touch it. Just let it sit there for 30 seconds and pray that the tank and the healer comes back in time to like, you know what I mean? And then before you know it, then it actually kind of like recovers itself, which is not really the worst thing ever. So, you know, I mean, I would like for them to make that ability become like a good usage, and it's a really good dungeon button, but you can't use it in raids. Swiftcast is literally part of the rotation, and it's a required button too. Lucid Dreaming and Surecast, same thing, right? So having this listing of role abilities is just not, it's good for how it functions in content, but it also is not enough for people who are literally like, I just want to have like an easy time doing MSQ, but I also don't want the MSQ to be like too easy. But like, you know, give me something, at least is what I'm thinking. But also I feel like here's the other issue that I'm kind of thinking about as well, as like a tank player especially, is like every tank basically has Rampart, which they all use the same way. They have their 120, which has like a little bit of a shift in terms of Dawntrail, right? But like there's like a little bit of a caveat, but the way that you press the button is the same, so like that's kind of like whatever. And then they have like another 90, like Peril, Camouflage, Dark Mind, Technical 60, right? Bulwark, but same thing, right? Like you press a button in the same format. So like, what I would actually like for him to do is take some of these abilities and just give them like a variation that is specific to the tank. So like like a Paladin's Rampart, it will basically just combine Rampart and Bulwark together. So it gives you 20%, but it also has like a chance to block, which would be cool. But then what you should do is just change Bulwark as an ability entirely. I don't know how they would do that, but like they could. I don't know what they would do, but like that's an idea. A Gunbreaker's Rampart could be something like a regen, which combines like Aurora, which you can stack with Aurora, which would be cool. And right, and then there's that. Then like Dark Knight's Rampart would be like, you know, some kind of combination of like a TBN or something. I don't know, right? And then Warriors would be like a mitigation factor, like a raw intuition combined with Rampart. But then you still have all the, you know what I mean? And then like, because Dark Mind, Camouflage, Bulwark, and Thrill actually all have different button, like property functionalities, which is cool. But like the idea behind how they function is still like use the same. But then you take the 120 long cooldown, right? So you got Nebula, Sentinel, Shadow Wall, and Vengeance, and then they all get their upgrades. But like their upgrades are just each other's abilities just like swapped around. So Guardian, which is Paladin Sentinel, is just a 40% 120 that just has like a fat TBN, right? Gunbreaker's Great Nebula is 40%, but it has Thrill of Battle. Like, noticing a pattern, right? So like, the difference is at least Dark Knight's Shadowed Vigil, where it's like a big X-Cog, because not many abilities like have like X-Cog, but that there's technically how to corundum. And then Damnation, which is Warriors, is just like a huge regen, right? But like that, but again, like it's kind of cool. But it also is like Aurora slot, you know. So like, I understand that there's not a lot of methods and how they can kind of switch around what they do and that sort of thing. So I appreciate that the buttons were all 120 and 30%, and they found a way to just make them all different in that way. But I would like for them to kind of keep on stretching that out, right? And just changing how each button works in some capacity, shape, and form. And like with healer too, like I think that what they could do with like, they could add an ability that is just like, I don't even know what I want to call it, but something where it just has like an effect. Or you know what, actually what they should do is they should turn they should just turn the rays into a roll ability. The animation will still be unique to the job, which would be cool. But if you know, a white mage res would just be, instead of you spawning at like 10%, you spawn at like 60, which is like the bonus, right? Sage can have like a temporary cardia that you don't have to like give cardia, or if you do, it stacks, where you know, your attack will kind of just give them like HP at this point in the process, which would be cool. Astro, I feel like you can just give it like a mitigation, like a percent, like 20%, 30% mitigation, right? And then for Scholar, you can just give it like a shield. But that changes how the res works, because the thing is, like, the resurrection between all the healers is the same exact thing that the tanks had in the 120 section, where they all do the exact same thing. The only reason why their names are different is because the animation is different, and that's literally it. So what they should do is figure out how to change the resurrection between the healers and give them some kind of effect that at least differentiates them, and then that would be really cool. And I think you can also do the same thing with like Lucid Dreaming. Although like Lucid Dreaming is, it's such a weird ability, because in my mind, this is like a hot take, so like bear with me, but I would like for Piety to become a usable stat where it, because right now it only affects MP regen. I would like for it to also affect MP regen. It's kind of like the healer's tenacity, right? It does damage, it does healing, but also MP regen, and like you kind of need it in the stat sort of, but it's better than determination because of some properties, numerically speaking. Like I'm kind of tired of crit and determination being like the primary stats you find, and then you fill with like direct hit, whatever. So anyways, Lucid Dreaming is an ability that every caster has the same form of. But it'd be cool if there was like a difference between healers Lucid Dreaming and like casters Lucid Dreaming. Same thing with like Surecast. I don't know what they would change, but it'd be cool if they found a way to like change it. So that's just me. And then you got like Second Wind, right? Second Wind, same thing. Like Second Wind having a shared property between Fizz range and melee, but being the exact same button. There's something about it that I would like for them to figure out how to change. Something. I don't know exactly what it is, but I would like it. So who knows? And then even like with Feint, like Feint's actually a great ability as well. It kind of functions in the same thought process as like Reprisal and Rampart, where there should be like a Feint of the Reaper or Feint of the Dragoon or of the Monk or something, and then I don't know what they would change. But it would be cool if they changed properties that are like unique. Like for Viper, like I feel like it'd be cool if you can have like a temporary like mini sprint if you are using Feint of the Viper, and it's only for Viper, right? Or if you can like select different ones, that'd be kind of too much though. Like if I can be a Dragoon but use Feint of the Viper, because it gives me like a, you know, at least there's then, because then that'll kind of create the idea of like, oh, there's one that's always like better than the other. But what they should be is situational instead of like being like a tier list kind of thing. So that's my thought process though. Anyways. So now what I want to do is just kind of cover a lot of the removed actions, because everyone has these actions that we've seen and we miss because of just kind of how it functioned. And this is kind of the point that I wanted to inevitably get to, is a lot of these removed actions actually can be brought back into the game At least I think that they should, but with like a caveat where its design is to provide some kind of defensive or restorative property and not be used offensively. Because what you're going to understand is that a lot of removed actions actually did some kind of damage, and they were either OGCDs or GCDs or cooldowns, and like you literally used it in rotation to some degree because of how effective it was. So Cleric Stance is the first one, where like it was such a weird button, but I loved it though. So it's like how tanks turn on their stance, healers would turn on this stance, and it actually did a lot more than just increase your potency by 5%. It wasn't just like a button buff. If you actually press Cleric Stance, your healing was awful, but your damage was great. So if you knew how to press that button effectively, when you know that there's just no need to heal, and it's just like a damage moment, then you literally can turn that on, enter some burst mode, and then turn it off, and then you can do some healing or mitigation or whatever. But then once you know that you're good, then you can turn it back on, and you can literally like toggle back and forth. They changed the ability actually quite a bit, and then they just turned it into like a little, like a buff thing, which like whatever. So I mean, could they bring back Cleric Stance? Honestly, like, I would like to see it possible, but I know that that can be kind of complicated. Because again, I think objectively, I don't want them to bring back anything that can provide like an offensive utility, unless you can actually allow it strictly in a dungeon setting or like a non-enrage like raid setting. So like dungeons would be a great example, or anything MSQ related is what I would be. If you brought back Cleric Stance and it's like only usable in MSQ, I'd be cool with that. Or like in fate farming, like that'd be kind of cool too. Actually, I didn't think about that until just now, but like fate farming could be cool. Or like events that like, you know, questing, something of that nature, like maps even, like that'd be pretty cool actually. So I'll be kind of down for that. Next we have Break. Break did it was a very weak attack, and it did cost a spell, so it was not that useful, but it provided like a heavy, but there was no real necessity to use it in raids, but you use it in certain formats back in the day. I don't remember exactly when, but there was like moments where Break actually kind of came in handy. So like, you know, take with it what you will, but I wouldn't be opposed to this coming back also if it was used in that format, right? Like maps, MSQ, something of that nature. But if I could just like remove the idea of the heavy, I would actually replace the heavy with like a slow and take away the potency. So like if a caster just puts on like a big slow, like let's say that the tank doesn't use arm's length, because if you get hit with arm's length, then you provide like a slow. And let's say that the Break is like an AoE slow, then you can just use it in a dungeon. That'd be kind of cool actually, because then it actually helps the tank or whoever is taking damage like survive a little bit better. And that'd be really cool. So I can, you know, I'd be kind of down with that too. Drain is the next one, and it was a potency of 80, which wasn't a lot, but you would get HP back. So in a sense, it was like a single target Abyssal Drain that you got specifically as a caster, which like this is a prime example of an ability that I would love to have if I was playing caster, where like my healer is just not healing me, or I mean, the Chaotic Alliance raid is a bad example because like it's a raid that's high-ended that is an enrage timer. But there's a strategy where if you're fighting Chaotic Cloud of Darkness, like the range are kind of like by themselves and needs to be healed by a different alliance, which doesn't really feel comfortable. I can say that for somebody who actually healed it. But if I had an ability like Drain, then it would actually like come in handy, because like if my health is low, then I can just press that button. But you know, it would kind of digress my point in terms of what I'm talking about. But anyways, you know what I mean. So like Drain would be great to have if it was again usable in like a dungeon or map setting or fate farming, because then, you know, at least you can kind of make your life like a little bit easier and not have to worry about like a healer or a tank keeping you alive the whole time. So there's that. Next we have Protect. Now this is probably the one where I'm gonna say that like don't bring this one back. This one is a weird ability. Although I do miss it, but it definitely didn't feel good, and it's actually one of those abilities that like is obnoxious to bring, because like if somebody dies, like Protect was required back then. If you go into raiding, you had to put Protect on the party and like kill it. Like there was no, it would never felt good to like recast Protect. But when somebody dies, they lose Protect. So when you res them and they come back to life, you have to reapply the protect, which was really uncomforting in a raid scenario. But like, you know, actually, if you brought it back in maps or fate farming or dungeons, I'd be kind of down actually. Because again, like it's physical, it's like defensive properties, right? Because you know what I'll tell you much is like, as much as maps are very like chill content, even doing maps with 2 people, like I had to go warrior and my buddy went like bard, and he and I were struggling to stay alive like a little bit. Having protect would have been kind of nice. And also, like I said, I was playing warrior. Like I, you know, self-sustainability to the highest degree, and like even I was still struggling, which I liked though, because it was like a 8-player recommended map and it was 2 of us, but you know what I mean? So I would have liked protect, but we didn't have it, obviously. So like, if they brought this back actually for that kind of content, I'd be down. Convalescence. This was actually a button that I'm actually surprised that they took out, but like, I don't actually know. I feel like they should just bring this back. It's kind of weird actually, but I mean, anywho, it increased your healing recovery via magic. So like it helped healers heal you better. But the thing is that they took this ability and they just put it on healer abilities. That way they have control over it, which makes sense. But it, you know, I feel like having it as a tank was actually kind of cool. I kind of enjoyed it actually, but I think I just like missed the animation too. Animation was pretty cool actually, so there was that. Next we have diversion. Diversion is a button that I greatly miss, especially all things considered. But the thing is that like the way how the like enmity worked back then was very tricky when you were playing tanks, because like tanks had stances that did damage and defense, but like the defensive stance would decrease your attack, and tanks didn't like that obviously, because like why would they? So literally tanks would just spam provoke and shirk the whole time. And also you had a ninja that would use like shadow walker, I think, or like this, or like shade shift or some, or not shade shift, but some button where you literally take your ninja aggro and you give it to a tank. Like ninjas had shirk back then, so you would have to literally do that. And then because tanks didn't want to have their stances on because they wanted to do damage, every melee and caster had to use diversion on like cool, I mean not on cooldown, but like when it was coming up to the point where you were about to take aggro from a tank, you had to press that button because you can only press it every 2 minutes. It was actually like a really good button. I do miss that button like a lot, but then they fixed the, you know, they changed tank stance, so like the reason for that button to exist like didn't make sense anymore. So like there was that. Anticipation is, you know, actually like a decent button. I did miss that button too. Parry rate was like a thing, but they kind of made it base kit for like paladin. I think it was broken on a paladin though. Like it was very, very strong to put on a paladin, I think was the problem. But I don't exactly remember that button enough to like know. I didn't do raiding enough to really like press that button, so I'm not entirely sure. Like I did raids, but a lot of these cooldown abilities like I did not use in Stormblood that I'm thinking about. I'm really trying to remember like what I remember, but like good button. I remember that button having it being like a problem in some format. But if they brought this back too, at least for like, you know, melees and healers, I'm just saying it could be cool too. Invigorate, we can just skip that one because they're not bringing back TP. As much as I miss TP, that management was kind of nice, because here's kind of my thing. I feel like as much as I enjoy not having TP because I can just press buttons and go crazy mode, when there's jobs that have no usage whatsoever with the mana, like MP, like I can't take away the MP bar. So it just kind of sits there at 100% the whole time, and there's something about that I don't like. Like when I play Dragoon, there's no reason for me to like have an MP bar. So like I would almost want a TP bar, but like that's just me though. But anyways, we move on. And then Tactician is the, you know, it has Enmity, which was like a necessity, but they changed it, right? Because now it's the new machine's ability, but it used to grant TP, which is cool. Awareness was very interesting. It like prevented crit damage, but they kind of took it out, and it made sense because like things don't really do crit like that anymore. Like the only thing that does crits now is like in UCUP and Ubu, because like those autos and tank busters can still do crit damage because like Stormblood ultimate, but like I don't know. Then there's goad. You can refresh TP. You can give it to a person, which was very interesting. I don't know why you would ever do that though, but like it was what it was. Refresh was just tactician, but for MP, which back in the day was actually super good, but it only was from Fizz range. So there's that. Mana shift was broken because Black Mage. You can be a Black Mage and give mana shift to somebody, and then they would literally just because the astral fire Umbral Ice thing still worked the same way. Like so, you would literally go to Umbral Ice, max it out, and then you would go to you can just give mana shift to a healer, and then just the tick for the MP would go back to 100%, and then you would just go back to fire, and then just keep, you know what I mean? So it was really busted if you're playing Black Mage, but that button doesn't really see like a need to it too. Eye for an Eye was a healer button, and as far as I'm aware, this is an example of a button too that they should absolutely find a way to bring back. I don't know how they'll do that, but they should just find a way to do it, because it's like Radiant Aegis for Summoner, but instead of but it was for healers, and if you took damage, then the person took a damage down. It was like a reprisal if you got hit. It was actually kind of nice. I actually kind of need to bring that button back too. Apocus, I can never pronounce that one, so we're gonna just Apocatastasis, I think it's called. Yeah, sure. Reducing a party member's magic vuln by 20%. It was like, it was fine, I guess, but like whatever. Largesse is actually a shockingly weird button. I'm surprised that they took out, because they did take it out and put it into other like Jobs' kits in terms of like their, but I kind of would like for them to bring that back in some format. So there's just that. Ultimatum was AoE provoke, which was insane actually. That was worth taking out, so not a big deal. Crutch removes bind and heavy from a target, which made no sense because like only in dungeons, you know, whatever. Then there's Arm Gaze, which it was a stun, but it was only a Fizz range stun. I don't know why they took it out, but they did, so here we are. Palisade reduces physical damage taken by party member 20%. It was a Fizz range button. It was literally Rampart you can give to a person as a Fizz range, which, again, some of the abilities I don't entirely understand why they took out, but they did, so there's that. And then Erase was a caster ability that, yeah, you removed, it removed a dot from somebody and also restored HP. It was very unique. So here's the point. If they find a way to bring all these abilities back and only allow them in dungeons and not in Savage Raids or Ultimates or Extreme Trials or Chaotic or anything that's under like anything with like an Enrage, I'd be cool with that. I would also like for them to just take every single one of these abilities and just multiply them by 2. Give me double, bring everything back, double it, and only allow it in like dungeons or MSQ content. Because realistically, a lot of these buttons, as much as TP is like useless now, it's just fine. Like keep TP away, like I don't care. But it'd be pretty cool if you can actually be like a makeshift tank as like a samurai, and then, you know, have certain buttons to keep yourself alive, because like you can just be that person. Like if you're really good at the game and you know how to play a job and like sustain yourself well enough to figure it out, then you could actually just be like the makeshift tank, even though you're playing like a melee or something. Or if there are sprouts and you're like a mentor and you don't want the sprouts to suffer, then at least you know, it's really difficult to be a mentor and do content while not being able to actually help the sprouts like stay afloat. So at least with all these various abilities, you can at least have some kind of access to that, and I think that'd be pretty cool. Now the problem, of course, is like, you know, if you're playing on a controller or like on a keyboard and mouse, whatever, like there's just too many buttons in the hotbar thing. But I feel like that's kind of fine. You would just have a hotbar that is specific to some of these abilities and you don't need every single one. You only need the ones that can either keep you alive as a melee or a healer, or do more damage, or keep your party alive as like a tank, right? I think that's the idea, personally speaking. So yeah, that's kind of like my number one thing. I would love for them to find a way to bring back role actions in a way that like helps out people go through content without necessarily suffering in it, because like I said, it feels really bad when I'm playing a class and I can't do anything but just watch my party suffer because like the thing is not there. But and I think with all this in mind as well, the number one reason why I think all this should somehow make a return is simply so that they can raise the ceiling or the roof in terms of the difficulty of content. Because like the optional dungeons we had back then, like Fractal Continuum hard, Pharaoh Sirius hard, like all those dungeons actually used to be super challenging content. And you know, I think that with the shift that they've had with removing a lot of these abilities and changing how the kits work for jobs, like a lot of this stuff actually kind of makes the content like easy. And like they'll literally nerf certain things because like it's too difficult. And I think like if you just give everyone a lot of abilities to work with, and they're not unsure like why isn't it working, they can like mess around with abilities and figure out how to make it better, right? But at the same time though, this actually gives the opportunity to just make all the content more difficult, because I think that's like something that they can actually look into, especially knowing that we're on this path of jobs getting reworked and the jobs getting a bunch of changes going into 8.0. Yoshi P already announced that he knows what he wants to do with like post level 100, which like he won't tell us until the keynote, obviously, which is going to be years from now. But at least there's some way that if you're like a casual player and you kind of want to just chill and go through story mode and then be done, like at least you don't have to suffer with it. But like it can be difficult, right? That way, like you can be level 70 and be like, oh my god, like I feel like I'm like struggling, but also like I feel powerful, because like it doesn't feel good to be super OP at level 50 to 90 and then be kind of like at like level 100, so that's kind of how I see it, at least. So yeah, this is my #1 feature. I would like for them to find a way to bring this back, I think, most importantly. I mean, there's other things I would like to cover and talk about, but in terms of like the #1 feature, I would love for them to bring back in like fix and rework and then implement for the player base as a whole. It's this one. So yeah, there you go. I love roll abilities. These things are really cool, but there's just not enough of them, and then there's no reason to use them half the time. So there's that. So thank you, and take care.